Pierre-Laurent Aimard, and I'm a musician. I have an acoustical problem because I find that the level, the dynamic level of pop or rock concerts is so high that I feel in danger for my ears, physically speaking. So I try to compensate as I can, and my son Antoine tries to make me a little less ignorant than I am. I had a high level of resistance when I was young, what I now do consider as a kind of narrow-minded attitude that I had. I discovered too late that in fact you have the same problems in the pop, for instance, or in the rock, or in many musics than in the classics. Danger of the business, the problem of the isolation of groups that are very creative and that are not often in the vitrine. Problems of the fashion and how it can kill some expression, and so on and so on. And more than all, probably, relationship with the success, that means with the society in general. So I think that a better understanding of both parts, if I can say so, somewhere can help to understand the whole mystery. Well, there are many dimensions that are comparable, for sure. The charisma, the presence on stage, the commitment, the energy, the ability for communication, dimensions of expression, understanding for our era. Well, probably many other dimensions. Yes, definitely. The so-called classical serious musicians are supposed to be ambassadors for what we call our classical serious culture, to transmit to new audiences and new generations a very rich heritage, and to be witnesses for what happens today. So to be servants for creators and to be able to participate to the artistic education for the next generations. What one calls classical music or serious music or all these awful words requires most of the time a quite high level of technical training. This is the price to pay somewhere. Not always. If you sing in a choir, for instance, with a good director, you can make very good music, sometimes with a less challenging education than if you want to play a complex polyphony with a keyboard instrument. But as you said, there are ways to make music without the same level of discipline, and well, this is why we can be thankful to live in a world with a certain level of tolerance, where many ways of making music or making arts is accepted and is feasible. Well, there are many. And the most important probably belongs to the very first part of the life. For instance, when my parents, as musical amateurs, played probably in a quite amateur way on a very modest upright piano, melodies that I still remember, or when my neighbor on the 6th floor, when I went to sleep at night, played as an amateur pianist compositions by Schubert and Brahms. But I think that very important were when I became a teenager, the different ways to be passionated in music. This could be the way of a romantic like Wagner with Tristan, that has been for me a reason for living in music for an entire year. I knew all the music by heart and could say the whole text by heart. Or this could be the way of living creators to transform the passion in music into new aesthetics and new languages. First of all, I'd like to say that the educational programs should be much stronger to answer to your question. And if we observed some countries that have really got some visions for musical education, like Venezuela, Japan or Finland, we see that the answer is much easier to do. In fact, if one thinks about starting an education, it could be any kind of music. Mozart, Stravinsky, Elliott Carter, or many music from this planet. If the education is well done, this music can make sense and become familiar to anybody, and especially to young people. Well, at the start, I realized that I had a passion, I would say. A talent, I had no idea. But having played a couple of notes on an upright piano at the house of a grand uncle, I have felt an extremely strong attraction and a kind of necessity to play this instrument. Work, work and work. If you want to realize something, to realize it really, in any discipline, you have to work enormously. Not just for competition, but for yourself, for achieving something. That's the only way. But of course, only if work makes sense. If you work on something you believe to, and with the concentration and nourishing always your work with yourself and your creativity and with your soul, as one would say in Slavic countries. It changed a lot, because of course your relation with work is different when you have more experience. You can have a better economy of your work. It changes a lot also in terms of performing arts, because the performance takes a lot in itself of time, of travels, all the parts of the activity that interferes with the discipline itself. Travels, concerts, interviews, etc. So you have to, if you intend to keep quality with what you do, you have to fight strongly for preserving the work on the discipline itself and not just on the frames. In other words, not to be a victim of your success, what one could see every day so much with very famous or not so famous people. This is for me the saddest part of mankind, when somebody becomes disappointing in compare with the talent he or she had at the start. So what can protect you, hopefully, against this disease? The mirror somewhere. To try every day to decide, this was not good enough, this is not myself enough, I'm not risky enough, or I'm too much risky, I'm not prepared enough, etc., etc. So the mirrors are from all kinds. They can be your own years, recordings, etc. Can be your friends, but the true friends, the friends who say the hard truth, you know, your judges somewhere, and all the professionals that can really help you to become better, or to try to become better. Constantly. But also there is the belief. It's a mix, it's a balance. You know, you can do nothing. You have got the talent, you know, it's a present. It's, well, a gift of God, would say people who believe in God, or it's in your chemical structure, you would say, if you are the son of a neurologist, what I am. The only thing you can do is to work on the best way as possible with this talent, or to honor this talent, I could say so. This is what I try to do. Sometimes I have the feeling that I succeed, often that I don't. As I think that life is a permanent challenge to try to develop yourself the best way you can, very often I think that the challenges I have chosen for me are too high maybe, or not the right challenges, and then I don't. But then I think I have a lot of obstination. So I go on and ahead, and sometimes it works. But of course it's a permanent fight with yourself. It's a story of mankind with many dimensions in life. It's the same. And one can understand familiarity brings security, a peaceful feeling. Well, of course, too much security kills a dimension in humans, and too much protection as well. So I think a good balance between adventure, spirit of pioneer, and a certain amount of memories is fine. But of course, too much familiarity brings to conservatism. And this is one of the problems we have to face in what we call classical music. This is this enormous conservatism, especially in the musical education. This is, I think, one of the biggest risks for the future. the lack of musical education and the conservatism in the musical education. I presume that the persons that would ask that, and there are not many of them, I guess, are even able to decide on their own. I can't tell you the admiration that I have for the great master, Mr. Alfred Brendel, not only for having done the music he has done in his life and inspired us so highly, but also for having decided to stop at a given moment. I regretted that. I miss him as an artist on stage. But my God, I respect him so much. A big courage, a big mastery and self-control. I have to answer on a larger picture, if I may. We have a strange life. We are supposed to make something fresh on stage when we plan everything 2 or 3 years in advance. So our programs are supposed to take in account our point of view on art, on masterpieces, let's say, our relationship with an audience, our plan at a given place, at a given moment, and our own forces in order to be okay at a given moment for playing this and that and to be ready. Well, one can just try our best, but it's supposed to integrate the way to be ready with this or that piece. That means to play it enough, to prepare it in the right way, to have a type of life that allows to play this piece on the proper way. Some pieces, for instance, are not hard technically, but emotionally or artistically very fragile. Some others will be very demanding physically, let's say. Others can be played only at some moments in your life, etc., etc. So there is a kind of construction that allows to play these and that pieces combined at a given moment. And then, when the moment arrives, to know yourself well enough to anticipate and see what you need. Work, sleep, a walk, an exhibition, a good lecture, a good book. I don't know what else. A good meal, maybe. It seems that there are often challenges like that. You know, the stage is not an easygoing place. It's very impressive. It's quite frightening. And, for instance, if you play a piece for a composer, especially the first time, this is quite impressive. So I remember some moments playing for Mr. Boulez, for instance, or Mr. Ligeti, or other creators, where I wouldn't wish to many people to live this kind of feeling. Now, if you have told for your career, what does this mean? A general vision for a development. So maybe I should speak about one of these moments when you take the risk to make something that represents a lot of risk, but that will add a dimension to your own activity. So maybe, for instance, when I answered positively to Mr. Harnoncourt when he proposed to record the 5 Beethoven concertis, this was very challenging because this was not supposed to be a territory when I could be necessarily good. And at this moment there were quite new pieces from me. I had played very few of these concertos before, well, 3 of them never before. Because I always thought, my God, so many colleagues play that, sometimes good, for some of them remarkably. Why another one? There are many other priorities. And I thought, why to add another more or less good or bad interpretation? But then suddenly came this proposition and an immense wish to make music with an exceptional musician. And I thought, well, I felt this could be something that could add enormously to your life. Well, and I've taken the risk. Well, this transformed my life. Sometimes when I hear the recordings, I thought that I've make a very risky choice, but too late. It depends on the mistake. If it's a wrong note, it's done. It's too late. Only not to lose control, because that's a part of the life, to make wrong notes. And by chance, I'm not a pilot for a plane, or I'm not a soldier. So my mistakes will have less tragic consequences than others. But anyway, somewhere on stage at the given moment we feel that there is a kind of life risk or absolute emergency situation. So it seems that a mistake is, yes, the most horrifying thing in a musician life. But it is our life. We have to deal with that and go on and try to go on saving the piece we are serving. So the goal, I would say, is to consider the mistake in the general vision. How can we make so that the audience will not lose the piece and the life, the sense, the general picture of the piece, even with these mistakes? This is, I think, the priority. I think this is a permanent process. So this would be the list of not all the books that you read in a life, but so many of them, because every experiment becomes a part of yourself. Of course, you are a fielder and you memorize what you memorize. You make your choices. But at the very end, you are consciously and unconsciously a very complex mix. However, if you ask me to point on some crucial artistic moments that I have had and that maybe I would return to at the moment of my death, for instance, I don't know, but I would probably choose a certain amount of abstract paintings in the 20th century. I'm very fond from abstract arts, and not only in the 20th century, but I think that what happened, well, from before First World War, let's say, when Kandinsky starts really, opens the door for this adventure until the best moments after Second World War is something for me in the center of the mystery. And the fact that with abstract art one could have such a large scale of expression and languages, let's say from the raffinated sophistication in simplicity from Rothko until the liberation in gesture and in complete violent freedom of Pollock, let's say, for having two borders so far from each other, is something that has always overwhelmed me deeply, and that continues to do it. And if we speak from spoken language or read language, I think that what remains the deepest in me are some of the pages of, let's say, the, how could I call them, the essential poets that are able to shout about human existence, like among our French poets, for instance, François Villon, with his desperate humanity, or Rimbaud. I think, well, many others, but should have a day. Well, I would say there is a link between the loss of senses and creativity, not just alcohol but drugs or pathology. And of course, these have been the subject of many studies, very fascinating, and many tries. The question is to know how much what provocates the loss or the control is needed for that, or is the creator capable or able to get until these experimental points without what creates the loss of the sense. In other words, this is always the flirt, I would say, with a border between control and loss of control, or between consciousness and unconsciousness, that is so fascinating and has been so fascinating, especially at some moments of mankind, and that we can explore today probably with a more acute way thanks to neurobiology.